Harrison Ford takes 12 different pain medications every morning just to get out of bed. At 83, the man who swung from cliffs as Indiana Jones can barely walk to his kitchen. When an elderly fan asked how he maintains his strength, Harrison's confession about his broken body shocked everyone. The Tonight Show studio was alive with its signature Tuesday evening energy in Manhattan. The familiar blue and gold lighting created that warm, electric atmosphere that had made the show a late-night institution for decades. Harrison Ford sat across from Jimmy Fallon, both engaged in what appeared to be a typical celebrity interview about his legendary career and recent projects. The Roots had just finished their smooth musical transition, and the cameras were rolling hot. Jimmy's iconic curved desk gleamed under the professional studio lights, while the New York City skyline sparkled through the backdrop windows like a constellation of adventure films and cinematic history. Harrison looked every inch the Hollywood legend he had become. At 83, he still possessed that unmistakable presence and rugged charisma that had captivated audiences for over 4 decades. Though now there was a careful deliberateness to his movements, a subtle way he positioned himself in his chair that spoke of someone managing invisible challenges. Dressed in a classic brown leather jacket over a simple white shirt, he radiated the same authentic toughness that had made him one of cinema's most enduring action heroes. "So Harrison," Jimmy said, his animated gestures punctuating every word, "at 83, you're still making Indiana Jones movies, still doing your own stunts when you can? That's incredible. What keeps you going? What's the secret to maintaining that legendary Harrison Ford toughness?" Harrison's eyes held that characteristic blend of weariness and determination. "Well, Jimmy, I think the secret is that there is no secret. You just keep showing up, keep doing the work, even when your body starts reminding you that you're not 35 anymore." The audience was clearly mesmerized by his presence and the weight of his decades of iconic performances. Several older fans in the front rows leaning forward with obvious admiration for this living legend of action cinema. "And speaking of showing up," Jimmy continued with obvious respect, "you've created some of the most physically demanding characters in film history. Han Solo, Indiana Jones, these aren't desk jobs. How do you approach the physical demands of these roles as you've gotten older?" Harrison shifted slightly in his chair, and there was something in that movement, careful, measured, that suggested layers of adaptation invisible to most observers. "You adapt, Jimmy. You find ways to make it work. The character is still there, even if the body that plays him has seen better days." The conversation was flowing naturally, touching on his recent projects, his approach to staying active, and how his perspective on action filmmaking had evolved over the decades. The studio audience was completely engaged, hanging on every word from one of entertainment's most respected figures. "I have to ask about something that fans are always curious about," Jimmy said with obvious sensitivity. "You've been doing action scenes for over 40 years. That takes a physical toll. How do you take care of yourself? What's your routine for staying in action hero shape?" Harrison paused for a long moment, his hand moving almost unconsciously to rest on his knee. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, more reflective, as if he were measuring the distance between public perception and private reality. "Taking care of yourself gets more complicated as you get older, Jimmy. It's not just about hitting the gym anymore. It's about managing what your body can and can't do, and finding ways to work around the limitations." It was in this moment of reflection about physical challenges that a voice from the audience cut through the studio atmosphere with the vulnerability and recognition of someone facing their own battle with aging. "Mr. Ford?" Both Harrison and Jimmy turned toward the sound. In the 4th row, center section, an older man in his 70s was standing among the seated audience members. He had silver hair and wore a simple navy sweater, but there was something in his posture, something in his careful way of standing, that immediately caught Harrison's attention. "Yes, sir?" Harrison responded immediately, his voice carrying the respect he had always shown for his audience, particularly older fans who had been with him since the beginning. "My name is Robert," the man replied, his voice steady but emotional. "Robert Chen from San Diego. I'm 75 years old, and I've been watching you be a hero for my entire adult life." "Robert from San Diego," Harrison repeated with genuine warmth. 75 years young. What's on your mind?" Robert took a visible breath, and suddenly the energy in the studio shifted. The comfortable conversation about career longevity and professional challenges was about to become something much more personal, much more universal. "Mr. Ford," Robert began, his voice gaining strength through his emotion, "I need to ask you something that's been haunting me. You're 83 years old, and every time I see you on screen, you still look strong, still capable. You're still Indiana Jones, still doing action scenes." The studio was quiet, sensing that this wasn't just fan appreciation, but something deeper. "But I'm only 75, and my body is failing," Robert continued, tears beginning to form in his eyes. "I can barely walk from my car to the grocery store without pain. I need help opening jars, getting up from chairs, sometimes even getting dressed. And I feel like such a failure as a man." Harrison sat completely still, clearly recognizing something profound in Robert's words. "So I have to ask you," Robert said, his voice breaking with desperation. "How do you do it? How do you maintain that strength? Because if you can still be an action hero at 83, what's wrong with me at 75? How do you make it look so easy?" The silence that followed was profound. This wasn't just about Hollywood or entertainment. This was about the fundamental struggle of aging, about maintaining dignity and identity when your body begins to betray you. Harrison stared at Robert for a long moment, clearly wrestling with decades of carefully maintained professional image and the opportunity to speak truth about something he had kept largely private. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, quieter, stripped of all performance. "Robert," Harrison said softly, "what I'm about to tell you, I've never said in any interview in 40 years of making movies." Without hesitation, without consulting producers or following any talk show protocol, Harrison Ford slowly stood up from his chair and walked directly into the audience toward Robert. "May I sit with you for a moment?" Harrison asked as he reached Robert's row, moving with obvious care. Robert nodded through his tears, and the surrounding audience members quietly made space. Harrison lowered himself into the seat beside Robert with deliberate, careful movements. Both elderly men now facing each other in this profound moment of shared understanding about aging and physical decline. "To answer your question, Robert," Harrison began, his voice now carrying the weight of hidden truth, "I don't maintain strength. I manage weakness, every single day." The studio audience gasped quietly. This was clearly far beyond what anyone had expected to hear from someone who had built a career on projecting invincibility. "This morning, Robert, I took 12 different medications before I could get out of bed," Harrison continued, his voice growing more emotional with each revelation. "Pain medications, anti-inflammatory drugs, muscle relaxants. I have pills for my back, pills for my knees, pills for my shoulders." Jimmy had left his desk and was now standing at the edge of the stage, clearly recognizing that they were witnessing something unprecedented in its vulnerability. "I can barely walk to my kitchen some mornings, Robert," Harrison said, looking directly into the other man's eyes. "Getting dressed requires planning. I have to think about which shoes I can still tie, which shirts I can put on without help." The emotion in his voice was palpable as decades of carefully hidden struggle gave way to truth. "When you see me doing action scenes, Robert, what you don't see is the team of people helping me," Harrison continued, his voice now thick with both pain and relief. "Physical therapists on set, assistants helping me stand up between takes, stunt coordinators working around what I can't do anymore." Robert was nodding knowingly, clearly understanding this exact experience of hidden struggle behind public functioning. "And the worst part, Robert," Harrison said, reaching into his jacket pocket and pulling out a small plastic pill container, "is pretending that I'm still the man I was when I was 40. Pretending that Han Solo and Indiana Jones aren't just characters played by someone whose body is breaking down." He placed the pill container in Robert's hands. "This is what I carry everywhere I go now, not because I want to, but because without these medications I can't function. I want you to have it, not the pills, but as a reminder that there's no shame in needing help." The studio was completely silent, except for the soft sounds of people being moved to tears by this unexpected moment of radical honesty. "How do you get through it?" Robert asked quietly. "How do you wake up every day knowing that your body isn't going to cooperate?" Harrison was quiet for a moment, clearly accessing hard-earned wisdom. "I stopped trying to be who I was, Robert. I started trying to be who I am now. The man who needs 12 pills to get out of bed is still the same man who loves making movies, who loves telling stories, who loves connecting with people like you. The audience was witnessing something that transcended entertainment and touched the core of human experience with aging and loss. Robert, Harrison continued, every time I struggle to get up from a chair, every time I need help with something that used to be automatic, I remind myself that getting older isn't about maintaining the same capabilities. It's about finding new ways to live with dignity. He began removing his iconic brown leather jacket with careful, deliberate movements. Robert, this jacket has been with me through interviews where I pretended that aging wasn't happening to me. Tonight, it goes home with someone who understands that real strength isn't about doing everything yourself. It's about accepting help when you need it. Robert, now wearing Harrison's legendary jacket, looked somehow validated, not because aging was easy, but because his struggle was understood and shared. And Robert, Harrison concluded, I want you to know that every day I choose to keep working, keep making movies, isn't because my body feels great. It's because I've learned that purpose matters more than capability. You don't have to be physically strong to be emotionally strong. Jimmy, his voice thick with emotion, addressed both men. This is extraordinary. You're talking about redefining what it means to be strong, what it means to age with dignity. Harrison turned to address the cameras directly. To any older person watching who feels like their body is betraying them, who feels ashamed of needing help, who thinks that needing medication or assistance makes them weak, you're not failing, you're adapting, and adaptation is its own form of courage. The show ended differently that night. No standard closing monologue, no promotional segments. Just Harrison and Jimmy sitting with Robert as the credits rolled. Three people connected by the understanding that aging isn't about maintaining youth. It's about finding grace in the face of inevitable change. When the episode aired 2 weeks later, it became one of the most watched Tonight Show segments featuring an action star in the show's history. The hashtag #WowHarrisonFordTruth trended globally as millions of viewers shared their own stories of aging, chronic pain, and the challenge of maintaining dignity while managing physical decline. Robert became an advocate for elder dignity and healthcare accessibility, speaking at senior centers about aging with chronic conditions and the importance of community support. His message resonated particularly with older men who felt embarrassed about their physical limitations. He always wore Harrison's jacket to these appearances. Harrison never spoke publicly about changing his approach to discussing his physical challenges, but those close to him noticed something had shifted. In subsequent interviews, he began acknowledging more openly the reality of aging in a profession that values youth and physical capability. The pill container that Harrison had given to Robert became a powerful symbol in elder advocacy communities, evidence that managing health challenges with medication isn't weakness, but commitment to living fully. Robert often told audiences that he carried it as a reminder that taking care of yourself sometimes requires accepting different needs, and every time someone praised Harrison for his continued vitality and strength, he thought about Robert Chen, and the night he finally admitted that heroism isn't about never needing help. It's about continuing to show up for the people you love, even when your body requires 12 pills just to get started each morning.